Golfbet Roundtable coming at you for the Genesis Scottish Open. Rory McIlroy is back in action after that debacle at the U.S. Open. What to expect from Rory while we look to some perhaps long shots at the Genesis Scottish Open. Rick Gehman is here to join us to talk about some of those names you might not have known about or heard about and how that could help make you some money in all of your bets. Rick Rungood here from the owner of Rick Rungood. Will wanted us to call you the czar of Rick Rungood. Is that okay?
I accept all of those. Yes, president, founder, owner, czar, whatever you need. I'm cool with all of that.
Chairman Emeritus, I think will be the next one. Yes. Yeah.
I accept.
Good to have you here, though, for sure, Rick. This is going to be a fun one.
So we've got picks to get to, Rick. We've got long shots to get to, but we have to start with Rory McIlroy. And it was funny to me because the headline for people who didn't follow golf was Rory's taking a break from golf because of what happened at the U.S. Open. But in reality, he wasn't going to play anyway. He was maybe going to play the following weekend. He pulled out of Travelers and didn't play for a handful of weeks. What do you think about the whole thing of Rory? He took a break. Was it really a break, or was this really just what was supposed to happen?
I do not care at all about what Rory's been up to for the past couple of weeks. We are not going to get to the Open Championship next week and say that Scottie Scheffler is coming off of a break, right? That's just not going to happen. And I think a lot of the conversation around Rory is, it's very much gut based. He elicits a lot of reactions, good or bad. I try to take all the opinion out of it. I'm looking at a guy who is maybe the second, maybe the third, but definitely a top 4 player in the world this year, who is coming off a runner-up finish at the U.S. Open, going to a golf course in which he is our defending champion and firing on all cylinders right now. When you start looking at the way that he's been trending into this week, he does not get enough credit for how good his short game has been, how great his putter has been, and oh, by the way, he's the best driver of the golf ball on planet Earth. So I have literally zero concerns about what Rory has been up to over the past couple of weeks. I expect big things starting on, my time Wednesday night.
See, I'm going to go the other side. I have at least a few concerns, just because I think that there's a lot of options on the board for potential results from Rory. You laid it out, Rick, in a great case. On paper, he ticks every single box. He's going back to the place where he won just last year. He's playing well, as we saw. At Pinehurst, he drove on a string around there. Certainly, that's, if he drives it anywhere close to what he did at Pinehurst, he's going to be in great shape this week on a course where, Chris and I were talking yesterday how important it is strokes gained off the tee for success at the Renaissance Club. This is still a battle between the ears for Rory, and I think that you're right, Chris. It wasn't a huge break, but he was, if he wins the U.S. Open, he plays the Travelers the next week.
Right.
And so that's the one that he took off. He was never going to play these other two, but, what are we going to see from him? We've seen Rory bounce back in a big way from major heartbreak before, blowing the 2011 Masters. He turns around and wins a Congressional at the next major a couple months later. This is now a couple weeks versus a couple months, and he's had some other close calls as well. I don't expect him to go out and, flame out with a missed cut in the 76 or something like that, but there is definitely, a mental component, and I'm interested also to hear what he says in his press conference Wednesday morning to see kind of where his head's at, because there's a lot of focus on the space between the ears that's not going to show up for Rory on the strokes gained metric.
And Rory's been around long enough, guys, for him to take long breaks, and they go one of 5 different ways. Miss the cut this week, win this week, maybe win next week at the Open. So I don't think there's any rhyme or reason to say Rory's going to do X, Y, Z here this week, and then next week he'll do something completely different or something else. To me, Rick, I'm curious if Rory's at a point where does he even care about what anybody is saying about any of this? I know he tends to brush it off, and he says, well, you know what, I'm trying my best and I'm working hard, and I'm just taking it as it goes. But do you still think that this guy feels like he has anything to prove, given what happened last month at the U.S. Open? Anything to prove?
I think he does care, but I think he's very good at kind of disassociating from it when he gets onto the golf course. I mean, he has been in the spotlight. He has been the voice of the PGA Tour through thick and thin the last couple of years, and it has not really impacted his play negatively whatsoever. So I think he is able to get inside the ropes and realize that that's almost his safe space, and he can go out and get into a really good mindset and get into really good form. And I think it's going to be even easier this week because he's he's alongside Robert McIntyre and Victor Hovland in the first 2 rounds, which is about as comfortable as a pairing as you could ask for. Those are 2 very easy guys to play with, guys that he is friendly with. I think it's going to be good vibes immediately out of the gate.
I do think that he has something to prove. I don't think he has anything that he can prove this week. It's going to be about next week. It's majors for Rory as we get into that 10-year drought. But I will say, Rick's painting a very bullish picture, which I can get behind if things break the right way. And there's a lot of, factors involved that would help Rory as he gets going. If he gets off to a fast start in that comfortable pairing on Thursday, I think the sky's the limit. But we also have to remember, this guy's the king of winning the week before majors.
Right.
He did it here last year at the Scottish. He's won the Canadian Open before, the U.S. Open. He's won Wells Fargo about 17 times before the PGA. So this would not be unfamiliar territory for him to win and head into a major championship with that extra piece of storyline to say, oh, look out, hot hand Rory coming.
Yeah, I mean, Rory, people don't realize he's actually having one of the better years, guys, that he's had the last couple of seasons. For all of the crap people want to give him, Rick, Rory's actually playing pretty good golf in 2024. So I think that's another reason why we should be looking at him.
I mean, he's basically the 2nd or 3rd best player in the world.
Exactly.
It's a class all to its own. The problem is that Rory McIlroy, in the court of public opinion, is only graded on major championship victories. That's the only thing. However, if you look at the strokes gain metrics, like you said, Chris, I mean, it's unbelievable stuff. The things that have given him issues in the past, some of the struggles with left misses on wedges, or sometimes when he can get a little bit cold with the putter, we have not seen anything like that, especially post Masters this year. It turned into a Wells Fargo championship victory and a win with Shane Lowry at the Zurich Classic. I mean, it's almost unfair because he only gets graded for one result 4 times a year, but outside of that, he has been spectacular, and this run that he's been on is probably one of the best runs of his career.
Most people are going to stay away from Rory because of the number, because he's coming off a month stretch. What about some long shots, Rick? This is what you are so good at. Your models, they're very different every week, I know. Take me through your thought process on so many long shots we have that we're going to go through here on this list of who you like. Maybe if it's a DFS play with some guys you want to get cheap, or maybe betting options for top 10, top 20, top 40. What are you looking at this week specific, which makes this such a unique event too?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned how unique it is. And I think the field composition in itself, it's something we were talking about a little bit earlier, is so unique and so different. You've got basically half the field that resides primarily on the PGA Tour and half the field that resides primarily on the DP World Tour. Obviously, there is plenty of crossover, but you're trying to reconcile, hey, what do these 5 straight top 10s on the DP World Tour mean compared to guys who are finishing 32nd every week on the PGA Tour? So you're doing a lot of those balancing acts. And when I look at a board like this, there are certainly a couple of names that pop out, and it's one of the Højgaards, but let's make sure we get the right one here. I'm looking at Rasmus, who I think is actually in a little bit of a better situation than Nicolai is. He's been playing beautifully on the DP World Tour. He had a T20 at the Scandinavian Mixed and a T4 at the KLM Open. He's putting together good ball striking numbers. But Will, one of the things that I think is fascinating about this event compared to a time where the Europeans come over and they play in Florida is that this is really a home game for them, right? The PGA Tour is coming over across the pond. They're very much in their routine. Rasmus is rocking and rolling, and now everybody gets to come to him. I think this is a good spot for some of the trending European guys to really get something going.
You know that by Saturday and Sunday, the Wikipedia pages are going to be firing up of some of these DP World Tour guys, where you're going to have fans tuning in and saying, like, who's Jordan Smith? Where do I know him from? And how did he get here? And what's going on? So it's hard to know exactly which of these guys are going to be popping and overachieve, but there's definitely going to be a few of those. And I do think there is something we said, to your point, Rick, that, the Europeans and the DP World Tour contingent and the piece of this field feel a little extra sense of pride. Maybe they're defending home turf in a sense of, trying to overperform this week. I think that these are certainly it's an interesting part of the odds sheet. And if you look at it from a DFS perspective as well, are you looking for guys to overachieve, if you're slotting them in the 4, 5, or 6 spot on your DFS roster versus, maybe you don't think Eric Cole is going to win at 125 to 1, but that's an interesting switch from being the chalk at the John Deere to now he's over triple digits at the Scottish. And I do think that, back on the first page, one note from a PGA Tour perspective that caught my eye, that Chris had up was Mark Hubbard, who has made every cut this year and is clearly taking it as a point of pride. He's made the cut in some crazy ways the last 2 or 3 weeks, where he's playing his last 4 holes and 300 and things like that. If you can catch homeless Hubs in maybe a round 2 head-to-head, or if there's a made cut parlay or something like that going into the weekend, it's definitely something that seems to be on his radar and is a point of pride and a point of focus heading into this event, where maybe he would otherwise blend into that part of the board.
I'm so glad, Will, that you mentioned, what the expectations are, right? I think there's very little expectation that someone at 300, 400, 500 to 1 is actually going to win the golf tournament, especially with the top-heavy nature of this field. But in fantasy purposes, where you're just trying to see golfers who can outperform their expectation, there's a ton of these guys. We had Matthew Jordan, I think he was 175 to 1 on that board. So he's missed his last 2 cuts on the DP World Tour, but they're like good missed cuts, right? You miss it on the number. Your ball striking metrics are solid. And before that, he'd rattled off 3 straight top 15s. But the deepest that I was willing to go, not in the outright market, but for DFS purposes, was Julian Gourier, who is $5,600 in some DFS circles, and he has piled up 4 top 25s in a row. And these are big time events on the DP World Tour. We're talking about the BMW International Open, the European Open, the Italian Open. I mean, these are the world of golf has never been so deep. We see that week in and week out. And if you're able to compete regularly on the DP World Tour, you're going to be able to compete in this field.
It's wild to me to think just there's 36 names on this list. The last 18 here, guys, you could probably count maybe 7 recent winners in the PGA Tour, a couple of others who have come really close. So just to give you a snippet for everyone out there looking, watching, you want to do DFS, you want to do some long shots, some best bets, some top 20s, top 40s, this is the list to look at. Now, you kind of alluded to it, Rick, about a guy who I know your best bet is. He fits exactly your mold of what you were talking about, these guys who have done great on the DP World Tour, who nobody has any idea who they are.
Yeah, and that name is Tom McKibben, and I love this guy. First off, he is coming off a runner-up finish at the Italian Open. He finished 6th at the KLM, and here's another fun thing. I love it when these guys come over and they play in major championships like Tom McKibben did. He finished 41st at Pinehurst, which means his made cut streak goes back to the Singapore Classic globally. That's across both tours, and I love the way he's setting up, but I'm not asking him to go out and win the golf tournament. I'm asking him to finish inside the top 30. Go out and get yourself on the first couple pages of the leaderboard, put up an impressive start, and that's all I need from him. I don't need him to win this golf tournament. I don't expect him to win this golf tournament.
No, I definitely think that that's the line of reason when you want to look at these guys, whether it's from DFS or if you're translating that into these place markets. If it's top 20, top 30, top 40, get off to a decent start on Thursday, hold your ground on Friday, and then kind of stay in the mix over the weekend. So I think that, as we said, there's going to be 3 or 4 of these guys that are going to pop up that the casual fan of the PGA Tour does not know where they're coming from or what they're doing. And then all of a sudden you look up their DP World Tour stats and their recent results and say, oh, yeah, man, T24, T12, T6. This makes a lot of sense. So I could definitely see Tommy Mack giving it a run here.
Tommy,
Chris, we flipping the page?
Yeah, go for it, because your guy is not a snipe. Everyone knows his name.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, we're in the inside baseball world. If you say that everyone knows Benny On's name, but I do think that this is again a situation where I don't think he's going to win. I'm not trying to bet on Ben On winning if he hasn't done it yet on the PGA Tour. Although he did win the BMW Championship, PGA Championship, the flagship of the DP World Tour back in the day. But listen, plus 450 for a guy that has 5 top 10 finishes already this year. That is definitely a price that caught my eye. We saw what he did at this event last year, going out in 61, basically trying to hold that pole position as long as he could. Ended up finishing T3. I think it's a buy low situation right now. He's coming off a missed cut at the U.S. Open, and then he had to withdraw from the Travelers Championship. That really stunted his momentum from earlier in the year. But again, this is a course where you need to drive the ball well. Link style golf, there's less of an emphasis on what you can do on the greens. That's the Ben On playbook, and I think that this could be another week where he has a strong finish, even if he doesn't end up leaving with the trophy.
So my best bet this week, I want to get your thoughts on the mentality, Rick, of Robert McIntyre because of what happened last year. Okay, I got him for a top 10 plus 333, not only because of what happened last year, played well. I think he channels good vibes, and that's the big reason why I'm picking him, but playing well this year too, obviously with a win about a month and a half ago. What is your thought on guys who came so close at a course before? Do you use that specifically, or do you need to see a whole lot more if you want to pick them again?
Well, the worst answer, but the best answer is that it depends, right? And I think for Robert McIntyre, the way that he, quote, lost last year was that Rory McIlroy beat him, right? There was not a 72nd hole disaster where you had the trophy in your hands and you coughed it up. So I don't think that there are any negative feelings from last year's event. And I was diving deeper into this because I'm a sicko, and Robert McIntyre has played a ton of rounds and a ton of really good rounds in Scotland. So I have him for 31 rounds in his home country, it's kind of a big deal. There's a lot of expectations when you play at home, and you might have to help out with some ticket requests and all that fun stuff, but he's gaining over a stroke and a half per round in those 31 rounds. It's one of the best forms that we have in the country. So I think he kind of gets up for these moments. I don't think it ever gets too big for him, and I certainly don't think last year is going to impact him negatively. So Robert McIntyre, who's already got a victory this year and playing maybe the best golf of his career, is going home. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Better to stomach having Rory McIlroy beat you on the 72nd hole than, say, maybe missing a 4-footer to make the playoff, right? So I think that what we're watching here on the screen here, the highlights from that Canadian Open win, I think that's a big key for Bobby Mack. And I think that really freed him up as opposed to going back to this event and having it all be the storyline of, well, you finished second last year, you're the native son coming back, winning on the PGA Tour, winning that Canadian Open, I think really changed the perception of where he is in the game coming off of that Ryder Cup spot last year. And so I'm more bullish on Robert McIntyre this week because of what he did in Canada than maybe if we would have just come in off of a regular season, quote unquote, based on where he finished last year.
Thanks to you guys, I've never felt better about a pick I've made in my life. You know what that means. It ain't going to win anymore.
Sorry.
How about your long?
Sorry, Bobby.
How about your long shot, Rick?
Yeah, we just put the kiss of death on that one, I believe. But I'm going with Matthew Pavone here, and he is deep down the board at 80-1. We talked about guys who have already won this season. You can throw Pavone into the mix. He won the Farmers Insurance Open, and he really started off the year in great form, and then he kind of slumped and disappeared before popping back up at the U.S. Open for a 5th place finish and a T16 at the Travelers. Here's the thing: when I'm this far down the board, I don't care if you are just as likely to miss the cut as you are to finish inside the top 5. Like, I do not care about that. There's only one position that I care about, and it's are you good enough to win? Can you actually tap into that winning upside? And I absolutely believe that Pavone can. He plays a global game, guys. He travels all over the place. I mean, even after his win in San Diego, he's in Singapore. He's going to Australia. He's going all over the yard. I love that about him, and I know he has the upside to win a big-time event. This number is too long for me.
I'm with you. I mean, we nearly doubled up on this long shot here because I had Pavone on my short list. I watched him for a couple days at Pinehurst. He was really impressive. I thought he was going to fold. He never really did. It wasn't great that he thought his T5, his 5th place finish got him in the majors when it was a T4, but I digress. So I think there's a lot to like there. And when you're talking about upside, that's kind of a big piece of what fueled my long shot pick in a similar range. And I'm going to go with Eric Van Rooyen. He has not done a ton at the Scottish Open or in Scotland in general. And then I look back, and last year he just throws in a 63 in the second round. It's like, oh, okay, so you can maybe work your way around this place. He's top 20 in total strokes gained on the PGA Tour this year. He won last year in Mexico in the fall. It was that emotional win, and he hasn't done a ton this year. But again, he's a little streaky, and he just popped for a T6 in Detroit, and he's one of those guys that can go 3 or 4 weeks with a missed cut in the T54, and all of a sudden he's still going to be able to turn it on. And again, this is the composition of the player that I'm looking for at the top of the board and in the middle of the board at this point is I need someone that can lead with strength off the tee, and then we'll figure out the rest later. Looking at the weather forecast, I haven't checked in the last couple hours, but I do think that it's going to be relatively calm. We're not going to get the tough conditions that we had in 2022 when Xander Schauffele won this event at single digits under par. But I do think that last year may be a little bit more of an indicator of the type of course they're going to see this week and the type of conditions they might face. And so even though he didn't break 70 the other 3 rounds, but that 63 on Friday drew my attention for sure. And I think EVR, as a decorated player, a former PGA Tour winner, absolutely has the stuff to contend this week.
So if we are not, in fact, inside baseball, Will, many people won't know the name Ryan Fox, but he fits the mold you guys were talking about, my long shot here, as somebody who people go and Google and say, wait, who is this guy? He's done that before, Rick. He's done that before where he's had great rounds and people say, wait, where is he from? Is he from England? No, he's from New Zealand. And he's
about to be a 3-time Olympian. Everyone knows Ryan Fox, surely, right?
Oh, come on. Rick, I want to get your thoughts, though, on, it doesn't even have to be a Ryan Fox. Some guys who you think people are going to be names that, they're going to Google, why did I miss him the last year?
No, I love the blueprint, the DNA that Ryan Fox has, right? He's kind of a rare breed. He bombs it off the tee, but he has a good enough short game, that the touch that you usually don't see the big boys have when they bomb it all over the yard. So those two things I think are going to be pretty important. And then you can go deeper. I think there is a slightly worse version of Ryan Fox in Romain Langasque, and he is very far down the board. He also hits it well. He's also pretty stout around the short game, or at least much better than you would expect. So those are a couple. There's also, when you look at even someone like a Sami Välimäki, who we see pop up on the PGA Tour a little bit here and there, but you maybe only see his name on Thursday morning or Friday morning. I think he is super live. There are so many golfers that are accomplished on, whether it's the Asian Tour, whether it is the DP World Tour, who are going to make noise. Like, they're going to be on the first page of the leaderboard this week. It's going to happen. Do not be surprised. This is not going to be a 1 through 20 PGA Tour thing. So there's going to be a lot of names that people are going to be interested in.
He just named 2 more Olympians, by the way, Will.
Listen, Paris is nearby. He's waving the French flag now with 2 different picks. This is impressive. Ryan Fox is Cheerios and Romain Langasque is Toasted Oats. And some weeks you reach for the Toasted Oats and it works just fine. So I'm going to put Rick on the spot here. I'm going off script because I have a hot take and I'm interested in his thoughts. I'm out right now on Victor Hovland, and I'm looking at him in some matchups. I see Tommy Fleetwood in a head-to-head. I think Vic is an interesting player who on paper – you would expect him to start popping, especially heading into the Open next week. Everything about his game fits. I worry that he is getting way too much coverage for a T3 at Valhalla. That's gonna cover a lot of misgivings over the last 4 or 5 weeks. It didn't turn into the point of inflection that I thought it might, and I'm interested to know if maybe I'm being a little too harsh on the FedEx Cup champ.
I don't think so. I'm also cautiously optimistic, but I will probably be late on Victor Hovland, meaning that I need to see more. I need to see something else. The ball striking is fine. The around the green play has regressed to 2022 versions. I obviously, myself and everybody know, and I'm seeing him work there with Joe Mayo in Scotland right now, and maybe that's the secret. But this is a golf course where you got to have a pretty stout short game because it gives you a lot of options, and the amount of options that it gives you usually helps the better short game players. And then combine that with the fact that I think there is a little bit of pressure to get right before the final major championship of the year and try to make a run at the FedEx Cup playoffs. I just need to see more. I think there's a really good chance that he gains 5 strokes ball striking, gives 3 of them back around the green, and finishes T21, and that's probably not going to be good enough for the price that you're being asked to pay for him around the market.
So if he's out on Victor, he's out on Rory, we got to get our guest's winner pick here, Rick, and we're going to rib you because all of us have been on this guy very hard at different times this year. No one more so than myself. I'm trying not to be on him. Will said he was not going to be on him. Why is it Collin Morikawa?
I hate to tell you guys, but you were just a little bit early. Now is the time.
We all said that.
Yeah, I'll say it.
Only 3 months early. It was fine. It's fine.
3 months early, better than 3 months late. But here's the thing. Since the start of the 2024 calendar year, he's the 7th best player in the world. Since the Masters, he's the 4th best player in the world. And he's doing it in a very good Collin Morikawa way, very sustainable with elite ball striking, and the fact that he has figured out the flat stick. He's figured it out. I mean, he has lost strokes to the field once on the putting surfaces since the Masters, and that was a tiny little loss at the PGA Championship.
Wow.
I also love the way that the results are starting to follow along with the stat profile. I could throw a couple more things at you here, like those slow greens that we're going to see at the Renaissance Club this week. That usually helps guys who tend to struggle with the putter. And here's the kicker. The biggest correlator to wins is upside. How often are you gaining 5 or more strokes to the field? There are only 2 guys in the world who are doing it more frequently than Colin Morikawa are. Their names are Scotty Scheffler. Their names are Xander Schauffele. Colin Morikawa is doing it at a rate 10% of his rounds, the highest of anybody without a victory this year. There is so much statistical evidence that points in the direction of Colin Morikawa winning very, very, very soon. It's right now.
You don't need to convince us because we all want to pick him, but we can't pick him anymore.
We've run out of bullets in the chamber for Morikawa. But listen, everything is there, right? Everything is on paper, and certainly anyone that's lifted the claret jug as he did a couple years back has the game to handle links golf. And it's amazing to see some of the turnarounds that he has made. It almost feels like he flipped the switch at the Masters, where all of a sudden he figured it out one week and didn't quite get it across the line. But he's been really having some sustained progress, as you mentioned, in multiple categories. It's not just about the putter. He's getting the iron play back to where he was in 2020 and 21. And so to be able to fine tune and hone multiple skill areas at the same time has been really impressive. I'm okay being late after being early on Colin, and maybe this will be the week, and I'll tip my hat to you, Rick.
I hope so.
How about your winner, Will? Because I'm fascinated that you think that Aaron Rai continues the hot play that we've seen for a long time.
We talked yesterday in Key Stats, Chris. Right now, for this week, I want a player that's playing well, and I don't necessarily need someone that's a links master, even though Aaron Rai has won here, albeit it was in October. It wasn't in July when the Scottish Open in 2020 was held at the Renaissance Club. But this guy is still flying under the radar, even though he hasn't won. He came really close in the last couple weeks, especially in Detroit. But 4 straight top 20s. He's got 3 top 7 finishes out of his last 7 starts. The numbers, when you look at strokes gained, relative to the PGA Tour, he's way higher than you would think in terms of, off the tee and just overall strokes gained. So I think that, again, I'm looking for guys that are strong with driver in hand. Aaron Rai's weakness, as everyone will tell you, similar to, the 6 months ago version of Colin Morikawa, is on the greens. That's the biggest weak spot for him, is the putter, which theoretically will be a little bit neutralized on the slow greens that Rick mentioned. Just on the link style golf in general, you're going to have less of those 60-footers that break 15 feet and stuff like that. The ball striking edge that he has had over the last 3 or 4 or 5 weeks is going to be accentuated on this course. Yes, he is leveling up. Yes, this is a more difficult field than the one that he faced, the last couple of weeks on the PGA Tour. But I think that, the price there is really enticing. If you're going to go a little bit down the board beyond Morikawa and Rory and Xander, I think that 40-1 is really appetizing for a player who has done everything but win over the last few years, but also does know how to win, especially at this event and on the DP World Tour.
Rick, what's your philosophy on players who have been playing really well for a while? Because you can do one of two things. You could say, well, they're going to keep playing well, or they're due to fall off. How do you handle somebody like Aaron Rai, who's up and coming and trying to prove himself and keeps playing well?
Yeah, I want to know about the sustainability of things. We saw at times Shane Lowry was the first name that popped into my head, where he was playing well, but he was having the best 2 or 3 putting weeks of his entire career in a row. It was pretty clear that there was going to be some regression. Now, we've had a huge increase in putting ability for Aaron Rai, but it's tied to something. It's tied to working with a new coach. He's now sustained it for 3 weeks. And, oh, by the way, he's one of the best ball strikers that we have out on the PGA Tour. What I think about Rai specifically is that if you have been enjoying this great run of golf from him and you've been prospering off of it, even without the victories of the last couple of weeks, you must run him out there one more time, because this is arguably one of the better places in the world for him.
Will.
Like it just is, we can reassess this at the Open and weeks following that. But if you've been in on Rai the last month or so, you are in on him again this week.
Hype man again.
I like it. Let's do it. Run it back. All
right.
We'll see what happens this week.
Honest assessment on my winner, because Tom Kim is similar to Aaron Rai in certain stances, where He had a good run. He played 9 straight weeks, so the guy is exhausted. You can make that the reason why he didn't play well when he was supposed to. But now he's rested. He is rested, didn't play last week, didn't do as well at Rocket as he was supposed to. Tom Kim, is he the kind of guy who you look at with the sustainability? Or am I a fool for thinking that the guy is going to stay hot for a while?
No,
I don't know why this always happens in my screen, by the way. Will, have you noticed that? I get this thing popping up.
Yeah,
like, I don't know.
Yeah, hey, listen, you're setting off fireworks with your hot takes on Tom Kim.
I do not think you are a fool. I don't know if we are in full sustainability, but Tom Kim is definitely playing much better than he was earlier in 2024. He also low-key has a very good links golf record, not only at this event, but a couple of Open Championships as well. The one thing that we remember, when Tom Kim became a winner on the PGA Tour, he could do 2 things really well. He could play out of the fairway, he could hit his approaches, and I'll even give him a third thing. He get really hot with the putter. We're seeing most of that right now. So I would prefer to be early rather than late on Tom Kim. I don't know if it's this week, but I would be buying Tom Kim for the next 6 months.
6 months?
The one red flag or pink flag that I'll throw up on Tom Kim, all 3 of his PGA Tour wins were with scores of 20 under or lower. He won the Wyndham and 2 Shriners. He's a shootout sort of guy. You're not going to get there this week because it's a par 70. Maybe par is a social construct. We don't have enough time to get into that. But this doesn't feel like a crazy go low course for all 4 days. Maybe again, if the winds are dying down, if the course gets a little wet, it could play into his favor. But I generally am slotting my Tom Kim plays for those courses where I feel like 20 under is in play.
Rick, before we go, thanks for being with us, by the way, on the roundtable. Awesome insight. For the very few people who don't know about you, people in the golf world know you, but the people who don't, tell them where they can find your stuff and what you're doing every day.
Sure. So it's easy. It's rickrungood.com. It's a giant database for fantasy and golf betting, and there's a bunch of tools and data on there. And then I have a YouTube channel where I create content, which is Rick Run Good on YouTube. So type in Rick Run Good and you'll find all my stuff.
Go find him. If you don't know Rick's stuff, you need to go find him because he's one of the best voices in this industry.
I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you having me on.